Brothers attack mother's killer in Courtroom, Ohio. Murder sentencing turns violent. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. The room was tense, silent. Every breath felt heavy. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. In the front row, Daniel Williams sat rigid. His hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles turned white. Beside him, his brother's jaw twitched, eyes fixed straight ahead. Neither blinked. The man they hated, the man they had come to see, stood just a few feet away. Dale Williams, 62 years old, wrinkled face, cold eyes. He wore an orange prison jumpsuit. Shackles clinked at his ankles when he shifted his weight. He didn't look remorseful. If anything, he looked bored. The judge's gavel tapped lightly. Court is now in session. This wasn't a trial. That part was over. Dale had already pleaded guilty to aggravated murder. Today was the sentencing. For the Williams brothers, this was supposed to be the day they'd finally hear the words they had been waiting for. A lifetime in prison. No chance of parole. But as the proceedings began, Daniel could feel the heat rising in his chest. The words from the prosecutor blurred in his ears. All he could see was his mother's face. All he could hear was her laugh. And then, the way she looked in the coroner's photos. His mother, Amy, had been everything to him. Strong, loving, a woman who would fight for her family no matter what. And Dale Williams had taken her away. The defense attorney droned on, painting a picture of Dale's troubled life. Daniel's fists tightened. Troubled life? What about Amy's life? The judge asked Dale if he wanted to speak before sentencing. Dale stepped forward. For a moment, the courtroom held its breath. Then he spoke. His voice was flat. No apology. No emotion. Just words, meaningless words, about how things got out of hand. Daniel's vision went red. In that instant, it was no longer about a legal sentence. It was about justice, his justice. Before anyone realized what was happening, Daniel's chair scraped loudly against the floor. He surged forward, eyes locked on Dale. The metal table in front of him rattled violently. "You killed her!" The shout tore through the courtroom. His brother was right behind him. Both men lunged, muscles tense, ready to make Dale feel even a fraction of the pain they'd lived with for months. Gasps filled the air. The bailiffs shouted, boots pounding against the floor. Daniel's hands hit the table in front of Dale, sending papers flying. For a split second, their eyes met. Daniel saw no fear in Dale's face, and that made him even angrier. Strong arms grabbed him from behind. A bailiff yanked him backward, his brother struggling in another officer's grip. "Let me go!" Daniel roared. The courtroom erupted into chaos. The judge shouted for order. Family members cried. Reporters scrambled to capture every angle. In the back, someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Within seconds, both brothers were dragged out into the hallway. Their mother's killer remained standing, unmoved, as if nothing had happened. But for Daniel, this wasn't over. Not even close. The day Amy Williams died didn't start like a tragedy. Started like any other day. A clear sky over Youngstown, Ohio. Birds chattering in the early morning. Amy had been getting ready for work when she got a call from Dale, her ex-boyfriend. The relationship had ended badly months before. Friends said Dale couldn't handle the breakup. He'd been calling, texting, showing up uninvited. Amy told her family she was done with him. That morning, Dale's voice on the phone was strangely calm. He told her he just wanted to talk. She said no. He insisted. Neighbors later reported seeing her leave the house, car keys in hand. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Daniel paced in the courthouse corridor, his chest heaving. His brother sat against the wall, head in his hands. The deputies had ordered them to calm down or face arrest. Daniel didn't care. All he could think about was how Dale had stood there, unfazed, even after killing their mother in cold blood. To Daniel, this sentencing wasn't justice. It was a joke. But before we understand the fury that exploded in that courtroom, before we understand what drove two sons to risk jail just to reach their mother's killer, we have to go back. way back, to the day it all began. Amy Williams wasn't looking for love when she met Dale. She already had a full life, 2 grown sons she adored, a steady job, friends who filled her weekends with laughter and wine on the back porch. But loneliness has a way of whispering, of making someone think, maybe I'll give this one a chance. Dale Williams seemed harmless enough at first. Polite, quiet, the kind of man who held doors open and never raised his voice. At least, not in public. They met through mutual friends. He had a small-town charm that was easy to like. He listened when she talked. He remembered little things, her favorite coffee, the song that always made her cry. Amy's friends were cautious but not alarmed. "He's a little older," one said, "but he seems to treat you well." For the first few months, he did. He brought flowers. He called every morning. He texted her good night. But then, things shifted. Started small. Little comments about where she was going. A raised eyebrow when she spent an evening with friends instead of him. "You didn't answer my call last night," he'd say. "I was worried." First, Amy thought it was sweet. Concern. Tension. Then the questions got sharper. "Who were you with? Why didn't you tell me you'd be gone so long?" The charm that once drew her in began to feel like a rope tightening around her neck. One evening, Amy's neighbor, Carol, heard voices through the thin walls of their duplex. It wasn't a fight exactly, but Dale's voice had an edge. Low, insistent. Amy's voice was quieter, almost apologetic. The next morning, Carol saw Amy in the driveway. She was smiling, but her eyes looked tired. "You okay?" Carol asked. Amy nodded. "Yeah, just tired." The months went on. Amy's friends noticed she was canceling plans more often, sometimes at the last minute. When they asked why, she'd say, "Dale just needs me tonight." Daniel, her oldest, started to worry. "He's always around," he told his brother, "like he's keeping tabs on her." Her younger son shrugged. "Maybe they're just in love." Daniel didn't buy it. He'd seen the way Dale looked at his mother, not with affection, but possession. By spring, the cracks were showing. Dale's calls were constant. If Amy didn't answer, there'd be 3 more missed calls within minutes. Once, Daniel overheard a conversation when he stopped by her house. Dale's voice was sharp. "I don't like you going there without telling me." Amy replied softly, "It was just the store, Dale. That's not the point." Daniel waited until Dale left before asking, "Mom, what's going on?" Amy waved him off. "He's just protective." But deep down, she knew better. In June, Amy decided to end it. She told a close friend she was done walking on eggshells. She wanted her space back, her life back. She met Dale in a public place, a diner on the edge of town. She thought it would be safer that way. Over coffee, she told him it was over. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just stared at her. Then he smiled. A slow, unsettling smile. "If that's what you want," he said. "But I'm not going anywhere." First, she thought it was an empty threat. But within a week, he started showing up. At her house, at her work, even at the grocery store. Sometimes he'd just stand there, watching her from a distance. Other times, he'd try to start a conversation, acting like nothing was wrong. Amy told Daniel she was thinking about getting a restraining order. He encouraged her to do it, but she hesitated. Dale hadn't hurt her, not physically, and she didn't want to make things worse. Then came the phone calls, late at night, heavy breathing, or silence. When she did hear his voice, it was always the same line. "We need to talk." She stopped answering. She stopped replying to his texts. She even blocked his number. But Dale was persistent. He found other ways. New numbers. Messages through mutual friends. On the morning of July 11th, 2017, Amy got a call from a number she didn't recognize. Against her better judgment, she picked up. It was Dale. His voice was calm. Too calm. "I just want to see you," he said. 5 minutes. That's all. Amy said no. He pressed harder. She said no again. But Dale wasn't the kind of man who took no for an answer. By noon, Amy's neighbor saw her leaving the house, keys in hand, purse over her shoulder. She didn't come back. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. The courtroom was silent, at least for a moment. Daniel Williams sat on the bench, hands clenched. He stared at Dale Williams, the man who had murdered his mother, the man who had pleaded guilty, the man who would never feel the same pain he had caused. Daniel's brother, Michael, sat next to him. Both were tense. Both were ready to explode. The judge shuffled papers. The prosecutor read from a prepared statement. The defense attorney barely looked up. And Dale? He sat there like stone. No emotion, no regret. Daniel's eyes burned. He could still hear his mother's voice. He could still see her smile. But now she was just a memory. The judge began speaking about sentencing. Words like justice and closure filled the air. Daniel didn't believe them. Justice? What was just about this? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it. Michael glanced at him. No words, just a silent understanding. They had talked about this before. Not here, not in this place. But the thought was always there. The judge asked Dale if he wanted to speak. Dale stood slowly. He cleared his throat. And then, with no trace of shame, he said, "I'm sorry for your loss." The words dripped with emptiness. There was no weight behind them. It was an insult. Daniel's fists tightened. Michael's jaw clenched. The brothers exchanged one more look. The bailiff shifted in his seat, sensing the tension. But it was too late. Daniel stood. He didn't plan it. His body just moved. One step, then another. He crossed the short distance between them in seconds. The wooden table rattled as he lunged forward. His hands shot out, grabbing at Dale. The air filled with gasps. A loud shout rang through the room. Michael was right behind him. He grabbed Dale's collar from the other side. Chairs fell. Papers flew. Chaos erupted. The bailiffs rushed in. One tackled Daniel from behind. Another yanked Michael backward. But the brothers didn't stop swinging. Years of pain poured out in seconds. The judge's gavel slammed against the desk. Order! Order in this courtroom. But no one listened. Reporters in the back raised their cameras. The scene was caught from every angle. Later, those videos would flood the internet. But right now, none of that mattered. Dale stumbled back, his face pale. The man who had killed their mother now looked small, afraid, weak. Daniel shouted through clenched teeth. "You took her from us." Michael's voice cracked. "She didn't deserve this." The bailiffs finally forced them down. Daniel's cheek pressed against the cold floor. His breathing was heavy. His hands shook. Not from fear, but from rage. Michael's arms were pinned behind him. He twisted, still trying to reach Dale. His voice echoed in the courtroom. "You're a coward." The prosecutor stood frozen. The defense attorney muttered something about security. The judge called for recess, but the damage was done. Daniel and Michael were hauled to the back hallway. Cuffs clicked around their wrists. Their anger hadn't faded. It burned hotter now. In the holding area, Daniel sat on a metal bench. Michael paced the small space. They didn't regret it. Not one bit. Daniel spoke first. "You saw his face." Michael nodded. "Yeah, he's scared now." They both knew this would change everything. Instead of quietly sitting through the sentencing, they had made a statement. The system might not have given them the justice they wanted, but they had taken a piece of it for themselves. Meanwhile, in the courtroom, the spectators were buzzing. Some were horrified. Others whispered that they would have done the same. The judge would later resume the sentencing. Dale Williams would still receive his punishment, but the attack would overshadow the proceedings. News outlets would run the footage on repeat. Social media would explode with reactions. Some would call the brothers heroes. Others would say they crossed the line. For Daniel and Michael, it didn't matter. The system had failed their mother. And in that moment, they had acted not as defendants, not as criminals, but as sons. It wasn't over. Not for them. The courtroom might have quieted, but inside, the storm still raged. and the world was about to hear their story. The attack lasted seconds, but its consequences would last much longer. Daniel and Michael Williams sat in a small, gray holding cell. The walls felt closer than they were. The air was heavy. Neither brother spoke at first. A guard walked past without looking at them. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed shut. The sound echoed. Daniel leaned back against the wall. He could still feel the heat in his blood. The moment kept replaying in his head. The sight of Dale's face when they lunged at him. The flash of fear in his eyes. Michael finally broke the silence. "They'll probably charge us." Daniel shrugged. "Let them." For them, the risk had been worth it. No sentence the court handed Dale could match the years of pain he had caused. No apology could erase the image of their mother's body. Meanwhile, just a few rooms away, the courtroom buzzed with nervous energy. Reporters whispered into microphones. Some were already sending footage to their stations. On their screens, the scene looped endlessly. Two brothers charging forward, the chaos that followed. The prosecutor stepped out into the hallway, speaking to a group of officers. "This was supposed to be controlled," she said, her voice sharp. The bailiffs exchanged glances. Everyone knew the truth. The attack had been building for months. When they first learned of their mother's death, the Williams brothers were destroyed. But as the case moved through the court system, their grief began to harden into something else. Anger. They had sat through hearing after hearing, listening to lawyers talk about procedure and due process. All the while, Dale sat there, breathing, living, when their mother wasn't. In the holding cell, Daniel stared at the floor. His voice was low. "You think Mom would be mad?" Michael shook his head. "She'd understand." The guard returned. "You've got company," he said. A moment later, their father stepped inside. His eyes were red. He didn't yell. He didn't scold them. "I wish you hadn't done it," he said quietly. "But I get it." They sat in silence for a moment. Grief was a language they all spoke fluently now. Back in the courtroom, the judge returned to the bench. Dale was back in his seat, flanked by officers. His face was tight. The cameras caught every twitch. The judge spoke firmly. "This court will not tolerate violence. We will proceed with sentencing." The defense attorney tried to ask for a delay, citing emotional circumstances. The judge refused. Dale's sentence was read aloud. Life in prison. No chance of parole. It should have been a moment of relief. But for Daniel and Michael, it wasn't. Justice still felt incomplete. Outside the courthouse, the story spread fast. By the time the brothers were released later that evening, news vans lined the street. Microphones and cameras swarmed them. "Why did you do it? Do you regret attacking him? Do you think you'll face charges?" Daniel didn't answer at first. Then he said only one sentence. He deserved worse. That night, the video of the attack hit social media. It went viral almost instantly. Millions watched. Some cheered. Some condemned. In the comments, strangers debated morality and justice. Was this an act of revenge? Or was it an act of love for their mother? The brothers didn't read the comments. They didn't need strangers' opinions. They knew why they had done it. But as the hours passed, the phone calls started. Friends, family, even reporters from national networks. Everyone wanted the story. The sheriff's office released a statement, confirmed the attack. It hinted that charges were under consideration. For Daniel and Michael, that didn't matter. What mattered was the image burned into their minds. Dale, the man who thought he could take their mother and walk away, now knowing that even behind prison walls, he would never be untouchable. The next morning, the brothers met with their lawyer. He was blunt. "They'll push for assault charges. Could be jail time." Michael leaned forward. "What if we say it was self-defense?" The lawyer shook his head. "No jury will believe that. It happened in open court." Daniel exhaled slowly. "So what now?" "Now," the lawyer said, "you let me work, and you keep your heads down." But keeping their heads down was impossible. Everywhere they went, people recognized them. Some shook their hands. Some whispered as they passed. The story was no longer just about Dale's sentencing. It had become about two sons, their grief, and their breaking point. News anchors debated whether the justice system had failed them. Pundits argued over the thin line between justice and vengeance. And Dale, from his prison cell, refused to make any further statements. But the brothers weren't done talking. They agreed to a single interview, one where they would finally tell their side. They wanted the world to understand the weight they had been carrying since the day their mother died. The cameras would roll. The questions would come. And for the first time since the attack, they would speak freely. The world had already judged them. Now it was their turn to respond. The courtroom was empty now. Silence. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner filled the air. But for Daniel and Michael Williams, the noise in their heads was deafening. The bailiffs had removed them. They were placed in a small holding room. Hands cuffed, hearts pounding. Outside, the media swarmed. Camera lights flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Why did you do it? What do you want to say to the public? Do you regret attacking him? Neither brother answered. They sat with their heads low, breathing hard. For them, it wasn't about the cameras. It wasn't about the attention. It was about their mother. Daniel replayed the attack in his mind. The moment he lunged at Dale Williams. The feel of his fists hitting him. The chaos. The shouting. But then, the image of his mother's face. Her last moments. The fact that Dale had taken her life in cold blood. Michael stared at the floor. He felt no regret, only frustration, because even after the fight, Dale Williams was still breathing, still going to prison, still alive. They had wanted justice, but the system didn't give them the justice they wanted. Back in the courtroom, Dale Williams sat calmly again. His orange prison jumpsuit wrinkled, his glasses perched neatly on his face. The judge read the sentence. Life in prison. No possibility of parole. Williams barely flinched. No apology. No tears. No sign of remorse. The victim's family listened. Some cried. Others stared coldly at him. The words were final. But to the family, it didn't feel final. The story spread like wildfire. By the end of the day, it was on every news station in Ohio. By the next morning, it had gone national. Brothers attack mother's killer in courtroom brawl. Ohio sentencing turns chaotic. Justice or outrage? Public divided over courtroom fight. Talk shows debated it. Some praised the brothers for their bravery. Others condemned them for losing control. Social media exploded. Clips of the attack went viral. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. Some said they would have done the same thing. Others said violence in court should never be allowed. Daniel and Michael faced charges for the courtroom fight. They were released on bond. Their futures uncertain. But they didn't care about the charges. They cared about one thing, making sure their mother's story wasn't forgotten. They started speaking out. They told anyone who would listen about the abuse their mother endured, about the threats Dale had made, about the fear she lived in until the day she died. Months later, life had settled. Dale Williams was locked away. The brothers were awaiting their own court date. But the pain didn't fade. Every night they still saw her face. Every morning they still felt her absence. The justice system had closed the case. But for the family, the wound was still open. In the end, the courtroom brawl became more than just a viral moment. It became a symbol of grief, of rage, of the limits of the justice system. And somewhere in Ohio, two brothers still lived with the question, was justice truly served? For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.